Good morning, Caelis. I'm sorry. Do I know you? I'm Noel. Why are there pictures of us? Because we're together.
My boyfriend forgets he loves me before sunrise. Every night, I fall asleep next to the man I love. And every morning, I wake up next to a stranger who used to be him. It's been happening for months now. I've stopped counting the days. But it wasn't always like this. 3 years ago, Caelis didn't know my name either. Except back then, it was because we were strangers, not because a curse made us that way. It started on a rainy evening, in a small cafe where I used to sketch strangers because I believed everyone deserved one moment of being truly seen. That night, I saw him first. He was sitting by the window, alone, surrounded by sharp architectural lines on a page that left no room for softness. Everyone else in that cafe had already decided something about him without saying it out loud. Cold, unapproachable, not worth the trouble. But tucked in the corner of his drawing was a small flower, out of place among all that precision, like it had slipped out of him without permission. I don't know what made me stand up. I closed my sketchbook, crossed the room, and said the first thing that came to me. You don't look like someone who designs buildings. You look like someone who misses a place you've never been. He looked up at me like no one had ever said something true to him before. Because no one had. That was the beginning. Not the beginning of the curse, the beginning of everything worth losing. He let me sit down that night, and then he let me stay, in every sense of the word, for the next 3 years. I taught him how to watch a sunset without checking the time, how to buy flowers for no reason, how to laugh without worrying how it looked on his face. He built structures for the world. I built a life with him, and I never once imagined that loving him would mean losing him every single morning for the rest of both our lives. He wasn't an easy person to love in the beginning. Caelis kept himself folded up like one of his blueprints, precise, contained, nothing left loose enough for anyone to grab onto. His friends called him brilliant, distant, a man who built beautiful things for other people to live in, while never quite building a life of his own. I used to tease him about it, told him he designed homes for strangers, but couldn't tell me his own address for the first month we dated, not because he was hiding it, but because he genuinely wasn't sure I'd still be around long enough to need it. He expected people to leave. I think somewhere along the way, before me, everyone had. So I stayed. Not because it was easy, because it wasn't, some weeks. But because every time I thought I'd hit the edge of him, I'd find something else underneath. A version of Caelis that only came out when he thought no one was paying attention. Like the first time I caught him watching a sunset without checking his phone once. He didn't even notice he was doing it until I pointed it out, and he looked almost embarrassed, like I'd caught him doing something private. Or the day he showed up at my apartment with a small bouquet of flowers he'd clearly bought in a hurry, half wilted already from being held too tightly, and he said, completely straight-faced, "I don't know why. I just thought you should have some." I laughed so hard I cried that day. He didn't understand why it was funny. I didn't try to explain that it wasn't funny at all. It was the most romantic thing anyone had ever done for me, precisely because he didn't understand why he was doing it. He was learning a language he'd never been taught, one clumsy sentence at a time, and I got to watch him learn it. 2 years in, he designed a house. Not for a client. For us. He never told me directly. I found the drawings rolled up in his studio one night, hidden the way he hid anything that scared him. A small home with too many windows, because he said once, offhand, that I complained our apartment never got enough light in the mornings. He remembered that. He built an entire house around one complaint I'd made almost a year before, half joking, already forgotten by me the moment I said it. That was Caelis. He didn't say I love you the way other people did. He said it in glass and light and floor plans. He said it in flowers he didn't understand why he was buying. He said it by remembering things I didn't think mattered enough to remember. The night he proposed, he didn't have a ring. He had a sketchbook instead, handmade, the kind of thing that takes weeks to put together in secret without the other person noticing. Inside were drawings of every place we'd ever been together. The cafe, the first apartment, the rooftop where we watched fireworks the summer before. On the very first page, In his careful architect's handwriting, he'd written, "If I ever lose my way, I hope these pages lead me back to you." I didn't know yet how literally that sentence would come true. I said yes before he even finished asking. We planned to move into the house with 2 mini windows before the end of the year. We picked out furniture we never bought. We argued, gently, about paint colors for a nursery neither of us needed yet, just because it was fun to imagine a future that far ahead. I think that's the cruelest part, looking back. We weren't naive. We weren't rushing into anything blind. We had built something slow and real and earned, brick by brick, the exact opposite of a fairy tale. And it still wasn't enough to stop what was coming. Because 3 years before I ever sat down across from him in that cafe, Caelis had already done something that would decide both our futures without either of us knowing it. He'd saved a stranger's life on the side of a road late one night. A stranger who wasn't entirely human. A stranger who would return years later, not to thank him, but to warn him about a debt neither of us understood was already being paid. Caelis told me this part of the story only once, months after everything had already started falling apart, and even then he told it like he wasn't sure he believed it himself. He was 22, driving home late from a job site, the kind of tired that makes the road blur if you let it. He said he almost didn't see the car, an old sedan, flipped onto its side on an empty stretch of highway, steam rising off the engine like breath in cold air. No one else around. No other headlights for miles. He pulled over before he'd even finished deciding to. Inside the wreck was an old man, conscious, bleeding, strangely calm for someone who should have been panicking. Caelis pulled him free, called for help, stayed with him on the side of the road until the ambulance lights broke the dark. He said the old man kept looking at him the entire time, not with fear, not with gratitude exactly, but with something closer to recognition, like he was studying a face he already expected to see. By the time the paramedics arrived, the old man was gone. Not dead, just gone. Vanished from a scene where he had nowhere to go, no car that worked, no road leading anywhere on foot. Caelis never told anyone that part. He assumed shock had blurred his memory of the details, and honestly, for years, so did I when he finally told me. He didn't think about it again for a long time. Life moved forward the way it does. He built his career. He met me. He built a home we planned to grow old in. Then, almost 3 years into us, the old man found him again. Caelis said he was working late in his studio when he looked up and the man was simply there, sitting across from him like he'd been invited, though the door had been locked the entire evening. Older now, or maybe he'd never aged in any way that mattered. He told Caelis he wasn't entirely human, that he was something older than the word for what he was, a keeper of the things people leave behind when their bodies can't hold on to them anymore. A memory keeper, he called himself, though Caelis said the words felt inadequate even as he repeated them to me. He told Caelis that the kindness shown to him on that highway had created a bond neither of them could undo. Most people who saved a stranger's life asked for something in return, he said. Money, luck, more time on this earth. Caelis had asked for nothing at all, and that, apparently, was rarer and more dangerous than anything else he could have requested. You saved my life, the old man told him. So I will grant you one gift. Caelis refused. Told him he didn't want anything, that helping a stranger shouldn't come with a price tag either direction. The old man only smiled at that, sadly, like he already knew refusing wouldn't be enough to undo what had already been set into motion. Everyone asks for more, he said. You asked for nothing. That is exactly why I have to warn you now, while there's still time to prepare. There is a curse in your bloodline, older than you, waiting for the right conditions to wake. And I'm afraid loving someone as deeply as you love him may be the very thing that wakes it. Caelis laughed it off. I know because he told me he laughed, right there in his own studio, at a supernatural warning from a man who'd disappeared once already without explanation. He said it felt like something out of the stories I used to sketch strangers into on rainy nights. Dramatic, unreal, the kind of thing that happens to other people. He didn't tell me any of this until much later. I understand why now. What would I have done with a warning like that? Back when we were choosing paint colors for a nursery and pretending forever was a simple thing to plan for. The curse didn't wake all at once. It waited, patient in a way only very old things can be patient, until our love had grown strong enough to be worth taking. It waited until the morning after our 3rd anniversary. I want to tell you the truth about that first morning, because I think about it more than almost anything else that's happened since. We'd fallen asleep the night before, still laughing about something small, his arm heavy across my waist the way it always was, my head against his chest listening to a heartbeat I'd memorized without meaning to. Nothing about that night felt like an ending. It felt like every other good night we'd had for 3 years. Then the sun came up, and he opened his eyes, and he looked at me the way you look at someone you've never met. "I'm sorry," he said. "Do I know you?" I want to tell you I stayed calm because I understood immediately what was happening. I didn't. For one full, silent second, I thought I was still dreaming, because nothing about waking life had prepared me for my fiancé looking at me like a stranger asking for directions. I said my name. Just that at first. "I'm Noel." Like introducing myself to someone at a party, except my hands were shaking under the blanket where he couldn't see them. He apologized. Genuinely, gently, the way you apologize to someone you've accidentally wronged without understanding how. He asked why there were photographs of the two of us on the refrigerator. Why his closet was full of clothes he didn't remember buying, arranged next to another man's clothes like they belonged together. Why there was a half-finished wedding invitation sitting on the kitchen counter with both our names on it. I didn't have an explanation that made sense yet. I only had the truth, which at that point sounded even less believable than a lie. "We're together," I told him. "We have been for 3 years. You asked me to marry you 5 months ago." He looked at the photographs a long time after that. I watched something in his face try to reach for a memory that simply wasn't there anymore. The way you'd reach for a light switch in a room you thought you knew, only to find the wall smooth and blank where the switch should be. That was the first morning. I didn't know yet it would become every morning. By the third reset, I'd started writing things down. Small things at first. His coffee order, the fact that he hated crowded restaurants, the specific way he liked his eggs. Not because I thought a piece of paper could fix what was happening, but because I needed somewhere to put all the things I was suddenly the only person left carrying. The notebook grew from there. His favorite songs, the story of how we met, condensed into a few gentle paragraphs so it wouldn't feel like homework. A note on the first page that I rewrote a dozen times before I landed on something simple enough to survive being read for the 100th time. For the mornings you forget. I learned the choreography of those mornings the way you learn any devastating routine, out of necessity, not choice. Wake up first. Watch his eyes open. Wait for the confusion. Say my name gently, like it's the easiest thing in the world, because if I let my voice shake, some part of him that couldn't remember why still somehow felt it, and the whole morning would tilt toward grief before it had a chance to become anything else. I never told him the word curse in those early weeks. I didn't have it yet myself. I only had a boyfriend who forgot me every sunrise, and a growing, terrifying suspicion that whatever was happening to him wasn't something any doctor was going to find on a scan. Here's the part almost no one believes when I tell them, even after everything else. The forgetting wasn't the cruelest part. The cruelest part was watching him fall in love with me again. Every single day. Because he did. That's the detail that nearly broke me before anything else could. It wasn't a slow, reluctant rebuilding of trust with a stranger. It was Caelis, every version of him, every single reset, finding his way back to loving me on his own, faster some days than others, but always, eventually, arriving at the same place. Like something in him remembered the shape of loving me even when the memories themselves were gone. The first few cycles were the hardest, because I didn't understand the pattern yet. I'd wake up, introduce myself all over again, and spend the day essentially on a first date with my own fiancé. Careful, a little formal, both of us testing the edges of who the other person was. Some days he'd stay guarded well into the evening, polite but distant, the architect who kept everyone folded up in blueprints instead of getting close. Those nights I'd go to sleep already grieving a version of the day I hadn't gotten. But other cycles went differently. There was one morning, maybe the 5th or 6th reset, where instead of the careful stranger politeness, he looked at me across the kitchen and said, almost embarrassed, "This is going to sound strange, but I feel like I'm supposed to know you." I didn't correct him. I just let him sit with that feeling, watched him spend the whole day chasing something he couldn't name, until that evening, completely unprompted, he reached for my hand crossing the street the exact way he always used to, like his body had simply overridden whatever his mind had lost. That was the first time I let myself hope this wasn't entirely hopeless, that whatever was taking him from me hadn't managed to take all of him. I started noticing other things his body remembered even when his mind didn't. He'd make 2 cups of coffee without thinking, one exactly the way I liked it, then stare at the second cup like he wasn't sure why he'd made it. He knew, without being told, that I hated thunderstorms and would sit closer to me on nights when the sky was loud, even on days he couldn't have told you my last name. Small mercies, all of them. Enough to keep me standing most mornings. Never quite enough to stop the ache underneath. It was during one of those quieter cycles that I found the first real clue that this was something more than the medical explanation I kept almost convincing myself to accept. I was looking for his passport, buried in a box of old paperwork he kept in the studio, when I found a worn leather journal I'd never seen before. Inside, in handwriting years older than his current careful architect's script, was an entry about a car accident on an empty highway. An old man who vanished before help arrived. A single line, underlined twice, that read, "He said it wasn't over." I didn't understand it yet. I didn't have the word curse, or memory keeper, or any of the language I'd eventually need. I only had a journal entry that didn't match anything Caelis had ever told me, in his own handwriting, describing something he swore he'd never mentioned to a soul. I sat on the floor of his studio for a long time that night, holding a page that felt like the first real thread in something much larger than either of us understood, while somewhere behind me, in the bedroom, the man I loved slept peacefully toward another sunrise that would take him away from me all over again. Whatever was happening to us had started long before I ever walked up to his table in that cafe, and I was starting to realize it wasn't finished with us yet. If you've made it this far, thank you for staying with Noel and Caelis through their first sunrise together. This is only the beginning of what's waiting to be uncovered. Episode 2 is coming soon, and it's where everything changes. Make sure you're subscribed and turn on notifications so you don't miss it the moment it drops.